In this video, we're going to take a look at the Photoshop import in Storyboard Designer. So after you've finished your design in Photoshop, you're ready to make the move to Storyboard. The easiest way to go about this is to use Storyboard's Photoshop import feature. Understanding how your Photoshop file is going to import into the Storyboard environment will help you keep a more organized project, which will make life easier for you and everyone else that's working on the project. Now, the most common thing found in Photoshop is a layer. When you import a Photoshop layer, it becomes a control in Storyboard Designer. For example, let's say you have a Photoshop layer called Thumbs Up. When you import that, you're going to get a control that's called Thumbs Up. The control is basically a box, and it's going to have the same placement and dimensions as that Photoshop layer, and the render extension is going to be an image. And the image that's being referenced is going to be called thumbsup.png because on import, the Photoshop import that Storyboard has, it picks that name up from the Photoshop layer. So how you name your content in Photoshop is important. It's good to be specific. The group folder in Photoshop is a little more dynamic. It can become a storyboard layer that contains all of your controls, or it can become a control that has all of the render extensions associated with that control. And it will determine the area for the touch zone, which we're going to take a closer look at later on. So to make a group folder a storyboard layer, all you need to do is add _layer to the end of the name of that group folder. Then any of the content from that group folder will be the controls found within that layer. When you finish the name of a group folder in Photoshop with _control, you'll have a control in Storyboard, and all of the content in that group folder will become render extensions that are tied to that control. So it's important to understand that a control keeps all of its content together as one touch zone. The base of the button, an icon on top of that base, the text that goes with the button, all of that is under one same roof, which is the control itself. This way, when you press a button and you're applying events and actions to be carried out, it's being applied to one item rather than a specific individual item within the control. We'll take a closer look at how this works when we import a file from Photoshop. Now let's say you had a button and you wanted there to be an image swap and you press the button that lets the user know that the button's been pressed. All you have to do is design the default view of the button, and then on the layer directly below, have the press state of that button ready. In this example, if you take the layer unlock_btn and then add _up to the name, then on the layer below add _down to the pressed view of the layer, Storyboard is going to make one control out of these two Photoshop layers. The control is going to have one render extension, which is going to be the up view, the default view of the button. Then it will assign a variable to switch the render extension to the down view of that control when it's pressed. The variables and actions are automatically applied. This will help speed things up. All you have to do is make sure that your layers are named exactly the same way before adding _up and _down to them. Now, if your design looks all sorts of wrong when you've imported your Photoshop file into Storyboard, be sure to carefully follow advice given by Douglas Adams. Don't panic. Most likely what's happening is that you have active layer styles or image masks applied in your file, and these won't import properly. Photoshop is great with its rendering. It can assign drop shadows, bevels, gradient overlays, and mask areas of an image. These attributes can be applied to a layer to give it a fancy look, but when these effects are not being applied, you can end up with something that looks quite different. Fortunately, you can maintain the look with little effort. At this point, I find it's best to keep an original version, a working version of your file that you design with, and then have a copied version that you can flatten and rasterize before importing into Storyboard. All you need to do is run a couple scripts that will flatten your layer effects and flatten your layer masks. Then when you import, everything will show up the way that you would expect it to. So let's quickly review the naming that we're going to apply in Photoshop. A group folder can be a layer or a control. If the group folder is named with _layer on the end, the content in that subfolder will become controls. If a group folder is named with _control, then the content in the subfolder will become render extensions of that control. A regular layer in Photoshop will become a control when it's important in the storyboard. That's the most important. And if you add _up and _down on 2 layers, it will become a single control with an image swap on press. Just remember that you need to give the 2 Photoshop layers the same name before adding the up and down. So we've covered how to name our content in Photoshop and have a better idea of what to expect when we import into Storyboard. You're ready to import your Photoshop file, and if there's one thing you should take away from this video, it's this. A layer in Photoshop is not a layer in Storyboard. Thanks for watching.